morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of interesting stories percolating this morning. So we have some new, very bad poll numbers for Joe Biden in a series of swing states. We'll break that down for you. We also want to cover this big abortion ballot initiative that is going to be there for voters in November. What impact could that have on a state that was not so long ago a swing state, but is pretty firmly in the red column now? Very interesting potential fallout there. We also have some RFK Jr. news, a focus group of voters showing which voters are favoring RFK Jr., what are their common characteristics. That's very interesting. We also have a revelation from Tulsi Gabbard that she was asked to be his VP and turned it down. So we'll break all of that down for you. Also have a couple of media stories for you. Stephen A. Smith sounding off on some recent Hillary Clinton comments that our friends over at Counterpoints had covered. So we'll give you the fallout here from Stephen A. Smith, who is always interesting to listen to and charismatic. We also have a former ESPN anchor who is telling all about the dynamics of her Biden interview that she did at that network. You definitely want to hear that one as well. Major fallout after those aid workers were targeted and killed by Israel. Joe Biden losing all sorts of folks on this one, including the folks over at Morning Joe, his favorite morning news program, really sounding off. Reportedly, his wife has told him he needs to wrap up the war, so a lot to get to there. Saagar is taking a look at McKinsey humiliated on DEI, and also we have the Teamsters calling for a nationwide Molson Coors boycott. The Teamsters International President is going to be here in studio talking to us about that and also about their efforts to organize Amazon and a number of other issues. So very much looking forward to having Sean O'Brien back here in the studio with us.
I'm excited as well. It's always good to have actual union leaders here in the studio. So thank you all to people who support our work. That's why we're able to do what we do. BreakingPoints.com if you can help us out and continue to build. With that, let's get to these poll numbers. Some absolutely shocking poll numbers for Joe Biden. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Very high quality poll out from the Wall Street Journal. Registered voters in each state that was conducted in mid-March. Margin of error here, keep in mind, plus or minus 4 points. But even within that, we can see in the state of Arizona, we've got Trump +5. In Georgia, we've got Trump +1. Michigan, Trump +3. North Carolina, Trump +6. Nevada, Trump +4. Pennsylvania, Trump +3. And Wisconsin remains tied. So obviously, I think we can say that that's not exactly looking very good for Joe Biden. And the reason why it's particularly noteworthy, he's either in the margin of error tied with Trump or Trump is outright leading him, all in very, very critical states. This does not even necessarily include the RFK Jr. factor. And that is one where when we begin to think about the chaos and we begin to think about the falling apart of the Democratic coalition, on the polls alone, Krystal, we can see that there are such major warning signs that we didn't even see for Biden back in the 2020 election, whenever he was going up against Trump. And overall, actually, if you dig within it, what you see is a crumbling of the Democratic coalition at the exact same time that Trump is actually increasing his vote margin, both with minorities and with younger voters. So headlines, both in terms of his overall lead, but also in terms of the coalition of people that Trump is actually bringing to the table whenever he's voting.
Keep this up on the screen for another minute, guys, because they did do a poll that included the options of RFK Jr., undecided, or other, because, you know, it's obviously RFK Jr., but you have other third-party candidates in the race as well, in particular Jill Stein and Cornel West, who are on the left end of the spectrum. And when you put RFK Jr. in, Trump still is outperforming Biden in every state save for Wisconsin. It doesn't change the picture all that much. So the reason I want to keep this up on the screen, I'll go through what the top line is with RFK Jr., undecided, and other as a factor. So in Arizona, it's still +5 Trump. In Georgia, it's +3 Trump. In Michigan, it goes from +3 Trump to +2 Trump. So not a big difference there. In North Carolina, it goes to +8 Trump right now without RFK Jr. and those other options, +6 Trump. In Nevada, it stays at +4 Trump. In Pennsylvania, it stays at +3 Trump. And in Wisconsin, it actually does improve the picture a little bit for Biden. It becomes a +3 Biden lead, which does get into the question of, you know, who does RFK Jr. take away from more? Who will be in the ballot in which states? You know, these undecided voters who, when they're forced to, where do they actually land? So there's still a lot of fluidity and a lot of question marks. But This comes at a particularly bad time for Joe Biden because there was a little bit of a hopeful trend going on where his approval rating looked like it was getting a little better. People are feeling a little bit better about the economy. There are a number of national polls, we covered them here, that showed a trend towards Joe Biden. But, you know, if the national polls are improving, but the battleground states are still going Trump, well, that's the ballgame right there.
There's also been some very critical developments in the state of Nebraska, under-noticed actually, but now very important. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. So people will remember that Nebraska does not have currently a winner-take-all electoral vote system. It's kind of complicated, but it effectively meant that Nebraska was, President Biden was able to capture a single electoral vote from the Nebraska 2nd District because of the previous way that they would allocate votes. Well, the Nebraska Republican governor is now calling on the state to move forward, quote, with the winner-take-all system. He says it will just simply bring Nebraska into line with 48 of our fellow states. It will better reflect the founders' intent. The real intent here, because Nebraska and Maine are the only states which have split electoral college by election district, means that the blue district, which previously Biden was able to win and which Democrats had normally been able to rely on, you take away that single electoral vote. Now, a single electoral vote isn't usually something that you should be all up in arms about, but it was one that's very critical for some 270 math in a very, very tight race for Joe Biden. Even those over at MSNBC are now beginning to take notice. Let's take a listen.
The governor there has thrown his support behind an effort that would no longer allocate the electoral votes by congressional district. Because right now, it's 5 votes there. Typically, Republicans get 4, and President Biden, Democrats get the 1 from Omaha.
That's right.
If that changes, and we don't know that it will, the state legislature is going to look at it. But if that changes, that takes away Biden's best path to win. Because if he wins Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, but loses the other swing states and no longer picks up the 1 in Nebraska, 269. That leads playbook this morning, the alarm among Democrats that this is possible. What do you think?
I think this is what the modern Republican Party has become. They're now changing the rules in the middle, trying to benefit themselves. This is the hell that Donald Trump hath wrought. In the middle of this, changing the rules 200 days before the election is ridiculous. I think you're right. I think there are real simulation problems. When you look at the map, that 1 electoral vote really matters in the combination of other things. Then you need another state. And so the easiest pathway to victory has always been the Midwestern 3 states combined with Nebraska. Something tells me they're not going to get away with it this easy, and there will be a national outcry if they're trying to change the rules here.
Okay, all right. They're trying to change the rules middle of the game.
There's going to be a national outcry over the Nebraska electoral delegation system.
First of all,
Jim Messina.
It's already weird that they do this. No, it's weird. Can we all admit that? And that's why that they're changing the rules here. Now, obviously, look, I think they're clearly doing it for Trump reasons. But regardless, I mean, it's a single electoral vote. Why don't you worry a little bit more about maybe holding Arizona or Georgia than you do about whatever the hell's going on in Nebraska because of some strange rule where you could have gotten that one. But, you know, the fact is that they're so worried here because, as he says, quote, the easiest path to victory is the Midwestern 3 combined with Nebraska. I mean, right now, even those Midwestern 3 is a little bit of a question mark there, Krystal. But, you know, it is a smart strategy on the Republican side.
This is the hell that Donald Trump has. I mean, this is why you can't take these people seriously.
Yeah, true.
Election rules get changed state by state on a regular basis. Now, personally, I would like to have an even bigger change and get rid of the Electoral College altogether, which is a preposterous, outdated, ridiculous system, in my opinion, and we can just actually have everybody's vote count in the same manner. And I would wager that Jim Messina would probably support that change as well. So is that a, hell that Donald Trump hath wrought, changing the election rules, et cetera, et cetera? Obviously, they're doing it for partisan reasons. How about, instead of panicking about that, you actually try to win an election by offering something to the American people? You have an incredibly weak candidate. Your opponent is incredibly weak, Donald Trump. He's a criminal. People freaking hate this guy. They find him completely toxic. His unfavorables are ridiculously high. And yet you're panicked over 1 electoral college vote because you are lacking in such confidence in your own candidate that you know the very best he would be able to do is to once again eke out this very narrow victory like he did in 2020. these people are just pathetic. They're just ridiculous. And it's very clear what Biden's problems are. I mean, number one, the age issue, which I guess, you know, since they've decided to stick with this guy, there's nothing you can really do about that. But number two, it's very apparent in the polling he has a massive issue with the Democratic base, especially among young people, because of the Israel policy. So how about you get a little more upset about the genocide this guy is enabling that his own voters are disgusted by, and we'll have more on that specifically later in the show, versus, you know, this one electoral college. They're just ridiculous people.
Yeah,
they're just
ridiculous.
utterly ridiculous people.
Certainly, but look, from the, you know, it's just like every data point that we possibly have tells us that this is going to be an uphill climb. From the young voter piece, the Hispanic voter piece for Trump, the widening of his minority vote share, the crumbling of the Democratic coalition, RFK Jr., yes, he does take away from Trump, but Trump has made at least enough, you know, inroads with new coalitions of voters. Combined here, the Electoral College move. Republicans, seemingly, at least from what I can tell, have somewhat embraced mail-in voting and some of the other things now that they've decided that they have to, quote, steal the election too by playing within the existing rules of some of these bluer states.
You know what, just to pause you on
yeah,
that, remember last time around in 2020, all the Republican freak out about how Pennsylvania had and all these other states had made it more permissive to have mail-in balloting because you had COVID, et cetera. I mean, what Jim Messina is saying here is very much like what they were saying. How dare you use the, you know, legislative process in a legal fashion to change the rules. Again, listen, if you want to have a federalized election system where it, you know, comes down from the top, I actually am personally open to some of that because I do think there should be more of a standardized system. That's not the system we have anyway. I just can't get over
That's
how
a good point.
annoying and irritating his comments are.
I totally agree with you, by the way. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really for total federalization of the elections. I like a lot of the state control that we have, and I think it actually, in general, it gives more trust within the system. That's kind of what the original intent is.
It could be. I just personally would be in favor of more uniformity of rules. It seems sort of preposterous that, like, you know, in Georgia, the rules are totally different than in California, et cetera. But anyway, that's another fight for another day.
You know, it's like, I mean, for example, I think Oregon has all mail-in voting, you know, and has for a long time. And actually a very, very high voter participation. That's something I've always thought about and looked at. And at the end of the day, that's actually what I care probably the most about.
Yep.
Let's go and put this up there on the screen, though, because this is another indication of just where things are moving in the overall direction. Currently, the Cook Political has moved the Nevada Senate race from a lean Democrat to a toss-up. Now, obviously, why does that matter? Because they already have 3 toss-ups, including Ohio, Montana, and Arizona, all seats that they have to hold if they want to retain control. Then you throw in Nevada, which not a lot of people had been paying attention to. But Nevada, traditionally, I mean, look, Trump never was able to fully compete there, but it's been enough on the razor's edge in the past. And it's one of those where in a so-called red wave scenario, you definitely could see a Republican senator from the state. And most importantly, it's about the balance of power in the overall individual Senate. So just another sign, I think, to me, that things are a lot more difficult for the Democrats, both at the sub-presidential level and the presidential level. Really, all they can hope for is abortion. And don't get me wrong, they will and they should bet on that because we're about to talk. But anything else, Krystal, you want to get into?
No, let's just put up this next piece up on the screen, which gives a little bit more insight into how voters feel about these 2 presidential candidates. And specifically, I think the most important thing to note here is the way that Biden has really lost a lot of ground on some key metrics with regards to just character ratings since the last time he ran in 2020. So they asked this question, you know, can they manage the government effectively? Back in 2020, a majority, 52%, said yes. Now that has fallen off a cliff to only 39%. Is he likable? Used to be 66%. It's still pretty high at 57%, but he has lost significant ground there. Displays good judgment in a crisis. He was almost at a majority last time, 49%. Now that is down at 40%. Is a strong and decisive leader, went from 46 to 38. Cares about the needs of people like you, went from 55 to 48. I mean, that is like the most core Biden value and strength that he has had as a political candidate throughout his career. And now not even a majority believes that. Is honest and trustworthy, has also fallen from a majority at 52 down to 46. Just keep it up a second so I can talk through the Trump numbers as well. It's not like Trump's numbers are amazing on these metrics either. The only one that he has a majority rating on is a strong and decisive leader. But you can see his ratings have held more or less steady since 2020. The two metrics where he lost a little bit of ground is cares about the needs of people like you, okay, 45 down to 42, and is honest and trustworthy went from 40 to 35, so a 5-point loss on that one, which is actually significant. But overall, people, tend to think Trump is more of a strong and decisive leader than Biden, and people tend to think Biden cares more about the needs of people like you than Trump. That's always been the dynamic.
Yes.
But I think, Saagar, one of the things that I really noted is that Biden has lost a lot of ground on these things and Trump hasn't. Now, that's probably a result of the fact that Biden is president of the United States. He's in the news every day. People are paying very close attention. Trump has been a little bit out of the limelight for a while. And I think the fact that his ratings on honest, telling the truth, basically, have taken a hit is indicative of the fact that some of these trials and court appearances and indictments, et cetera, he is taking on some water from that. But it's interesting to see the way that they stack up in these metrics.
It's still that when he's leading, though, in some of those critical times, one of the things that, the manage government effectively, that's actually a very important question. Another thing I would posit is this. Everybody in the world made up their mind about Trump. Like, who in this country doesn't have an opinion that is well set now of 7 years or so about Trump? Biden, one of his great strengths was people didn't feel a particular way about him all that much. You can project whatever you want in the 2020 election. Well, now he's in the government. People actually do have a very negative view of the way that he is running the country, whereas with Trump, it's so locked in. Biden also doesn't have that level of fervent support of people who are ride or dies and will never leave him. They're very happy to leave him if they do disagree. And I think, you combine all these things and you could definitely see some strength for Trump there in the numbers. But again, don't get me wrong. Like you said, the convictions and the criminality, in terms of charges and all that certainly could be a problem. We don't know. And then finally, abortion. I mean, that's just the blaring red sign for the Republicans, because it is clearly one of those issues that people are very willing, even if they freaking hate the Democrats on 9 out of 10 issues, if you're with them on one, they are willing to overlook it, and we have enough data to prove that right now.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.